Now,
Someone who does
Thinking.
it's gone quiet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh no, it's not Tony.
Can we start?
Yeah.
Ready when you are.
No.
Wave if you're ready.
Oh, already?
Oh yeah, Twitter. Oh, Twitter. Oh,
Can they
dear,
see
you have
me?
to laugh.
Okay, are you ready? Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody, in the room and obviously watching from a distance. My name is Tony Hegarty, and I am the head of the School of Medical Sciences, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the SMS International Women's Day event. And the theme of it is breaking the bias. And for our event, what we want to do is to have a mix. We're going to have a presentation from Professor Finn, and then we have a distinguished panel whom I will introduce very briefly, who will then contribute their opinions and views on this particular topic, and then we'll open it up for any comments either from within the room or from a distance. We'll be able to keep an eye on any queries or questions that people fire in, and Kat Dibb is looking at that for me and will keep me under control. So I don't think that we should have too much more from the chairman, and it gives me great personal pleasure to introduce Professor Finn, who is the Vice Dean for Teaching and Learning and Student Experience in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health. But over the last year or so, I've come to regard her as a very precious personal friend. And Gabs, I look forward to your presentation. Thank you so much.
I'm going to stand over there because I don't think I can read very well otherwise. Everything we tell people not to do, stand behind a lectern. That's better. Great, well, thank you, Tony. So this title, it's named after a project that we've done for NIHR, which is the National Institute for Health Research, from the sticky floor to the glass ceiling and everything in between. I just want to note, you don't need to read all of this, but what I'm talking about today are biases. So they are tendencies, they're not absolutes. You may completely disagree with everything I say, and that's absolutely fine. But it's just noting that there's all sorts of different social factors and different individual experiences that come into play. I'm focusing on gender because this is about some of the research that we've done that specifically looked at gender. We did do some work on ethnicity as well, but I didn't want to dilute anything, and so we're just going to stick to gender today. Acknowledging intersectionality is really important. This isn't a man bashing, it might appear that way, it is evidence-based. We're just talking about lots of the experiences of particularly the women in medical sciences, both as clinical academics and medical students. And just because Athena Swan has moved on from looking exclusively at women, I just want to stress it doesn't mean that our work here is done. So we've already touched on the fact that there's lots of metaphors to describe women's careers. First, people can't, never mind smashing the glass ceiling, you can't get off the sticky floor. People don't get that foot up onto the ladder. But there's also all sorts like tightrope bias, tug of war, the maternal wall, the maze, the labyrinth, all trying to describe how women's careers are not quite as linear as lots of their male colleagues might be. And that starts right from undergraduate curricula. People think there isn't a problem anymore, but despite the Equality Act, female doctors earn about a third less, and that pattern's mirrored right the way through the NHS and all sorts of sectors. Lots of the biases I'm going to talk about actually come from the Centre for Work-Life Law in the States, who've looked at architecture, all sorts of different executive professions. But it also comes from really close to home. So this is a letter that some of our medical students wrote to the BMJ to describe the kind of sexual discrimination and gender inequality that they were experiencing within the NHS. So very much, very, very real. And what we want to talk about today is how being silent is being complicit in that. The easy thing for us to do is to ignore it, but we're trying to tackle it head on as a medical school, and we've written back. We're not hiding from the problem, we're really trying to deal with it and engage with our students. There is a survey out in the School of Medical Sciences if you have your phones and you haven't done it already. Natalie here is leading it. So if you have any questions, you can ask Natalie, but we're still looking for people to participate in that about your experiences too. But so ingrained is the culture of sexual discrimination and gender discrimination that for a special issue, as a bit of fun, the BMJ published a lexicon. If you try to advocate for women or other protected groups, then you're a feminazi. You might take on womenial tasks. I won't read them all out, but you can see it just gives you a picture. It's become part of our everyday lexicon, despite the fact that we think in 2022 we've moved past it. And it isn't just bias, but it's blatant sexism. So lots of you might remember Zoe Norris, who was the BMA whistleblower, who talked about that really old boys club. And then they ended up appointing Daphne Romney QC to lead a big investigation. When I went to present some of this research at BMA House, I was actually escorted in and out of the building because she was there at the same time, and I think there was a perception maybe we weren't to meet. But you can imagine that actually it's sexual harassment, it's an old boys club, women are often sneered at and overlooked, and that's something that's happening right from day one. So before we get into all the patterns of bias, I want you to think about a dean of a medical school. How many thought of a man, sorry, it's not very good English. Did you think of a man? Maybe not all, probably the majority of you. I did a quick count on the Medical Skills Council website of the reps who have posted on there. 32 men, 13 women, 42 medical skills. So here we've already got bias in our own heads just by the fact that we probably thought about a man when we thought of a dean. So what do the common patterns of bias look like? Well, like I said, this is research informed. We've done some work with undergraduate medical students across a few different institutions. So this is a paper I published when I was at Hull York. And then the second image refers to some work that was commissioned by NIHR, the Academy of Medical Sciences, Cancer Research, all of the big funders. They've noticed a real drop-off in clinical academic careers for women in particular. And we're really keen to explore what was happening. So the first is lots of interviews and focus groups with medical students. The second, interviews with people right the way through their career within clinical academia, deans, presidents of royal colleges, people trying to get their first foot on the ladder. And they also provided us with really insightful audio diary reflections, some coming in at 3 in the morning, recorded in the corner of A&E about the sort of biases. They were looking at all sorts of biases, but I'm just teasing out the data pertaining to gender. We've also been doing some work to look at some of our other marginalised groups, such as our LGBT medical students and doctors. I'm not expecting you to be able to read all of this, but it's just to show you the plethora and the breadth of the kind of issues that people are facing. So there's 4 documented patterns of bias within executive professions. I've got a few more to add, but that's something for another day. There's the prove it again bias, the tightrope bias, maternal wall, and the tug of war. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the first 3 and then touch on another couple of examples. So prove it again bias. This stems from assumptions about being a typical woman. So women having to prove themselves over and over and over again to be seen as being equally as competent as men, where we're held to the rules much more rigorously. So for example, if I put a promotion application in, maybe I wanted to, be the head of finance, and they say, well, she hasn't got the accounting qualification, so she's no good. The man might not have it either, but he has the potential to achieve it, or we know he's got good form, so he'll get there in the end. So this kind of prove it again bias, well documented in lots of professions, but with our students as well. So they've talked about having to prove themselves over and over again, having to act beyond their male counterparts, that people dumb things down when they're talking to them, and that they get censored as well. We're being told we're not allowed to see certain patients or procedures because of our gender, that they couldn't handle it. They have to prove themselves as being capable before they're even allowed to see the patient and learn. The next is the tightrope bias. So this is when we get pressured into behaving in feminine ways. If you do so though, then you're soft and you can't quite handle yourself. But if I assume masculine behaviours, I'm too severe, I'm a bully, I'm discriminatory. So how might that manifest within a medical school or within our curricula? It can be things like literal housework. Go and pop the kettle on for the men in the meeting, or the women. Being given more of the mentorship and what people might class as the softer side of things. Having to do the emotional work and trying to support your colleagues more than other counterparts. Organising the meeting and that kind of playing mother. Note-taking, retrieving, so could you just pop back and get something from my desk? So these are all examples from both from the literature and also from our data sets. I won't go through all of them, but as you can see, quite a long list. From our students and from the clinical academic data, you can the women are having to sort of mediate their behaviour so that they don't come across as too aggressive, otherwise they won't get to climb that career ladder. I don't like to rock the boat, even if they make reference to family-friendly specialties. So for my comfort, I tend to smile and nod along. And this is something we see quite a lot. Women are being told that they can only pursue certain types of careers that might be more family-friendly, that are not too physically onerous. So that all speaks to this idea of the tightrope bias. The maternal wall bias is a really interesting one because it doesn't just pertain to mothers. Anybody, and it's obviously making quite gendered assumptions, but anybody who is female, who might be of a childbearing age, and maybe not even at that, there might even be an 18-year-old, but assumptions that a female might want to be a mother and therefore they're not that invested in their career. Once you've got children, I could be at a meeting, maybe I'm presenting, I don't know, to a Royal College, and my male colleague's not in the office. He might be at home with the kids. The assumption would be that the female is distracted by her family and not in work for those reasons. So it's all of these kind of everyday assumptions and a disapproval based on, it's a kind of you can't win. If I'm in work, I'm a bad mother. I'm a part-time mother. My children have been dragged up by somebody else. If I'm at home, I'm not committed. And even down to the point of telling medical students you should think, if you want to be a doctor, you should think about primary care, much more family friendly. They may never want children. So you don't have to have children to be subject to the maternal wall bias. People not being offered, these are some of the quotes, people not being offered positions of seniority when they come back from maternity leave, not being pushed for promotion, presumptions that when they're at the desk, they're not, they're with their children, or that their priorities and aspirations have changed. So what other kind of bias are we seeing? Again, this is a bit more of an infographic just to show you some of the sorts of things that our students have been telling us about. So for women, actually, the self can be quite a big barrier. There's lots of self-doubt, or they get told by other women, do you know what, it's hard, walk away now. There's lots of issues with culture, with motivation, the intra-specialty biases as well. Primary care dentists. I should say that the clinical academic data comes from both doctors and dentists as well. Snobbery about primary care, snobbery about certain types of research, particularly my field in education research. That's the lowest of the low. And negative working environments. With the clinical academics, you can see here we've got all sorts of barriers. If you take maternity leave, you're perceived as being de-skilled, there's a lack of funding, there's nothing to help with childcare to enable you to go to a conference, lack of clarity, gender inequality, and then reverse discrimination for men too. So these are a few examples, because we are in a medical school or a faculty of health sciences. Rather than the clinical academic quotes, I've pulled out a little bit more about the curriculum side of things. So some of our gender assumptions are often based around the way that we presume everybody is heterosexual. So we teach students, when I say we, this is a national problem, not speaking to Manchester specifically, but medical students have reported to us that they don't feel prepared to talk to people about their sexual orientation, that there's often heteronormative assumptions, both towards them, so when you get married and have children, you might not want to do this job, or when they're talking to people, and that they don't feel like they've got the right lexicon in terms of talking to LGBT patients. part of that also speaks to the absence of role models. There's quite a lot of quotes here for you to have a look at, and I'll circulate these later. But for example, in my experience, there's slightly more likely to be a male patient when examining the cardiovascular system. A male patient just because there's potentially less undressing required. So this starts to tap into the idea of bias coming in with the hidden curriculum. The way that we choose our life models or our simulated patients, it's easier to get a man to whip his t-shirt off than to get a woman to have to get a chaperone, to get into the awkward situation of asking them to take off their bra and navigating breast tissue. But this is just feeding into all of this everyday bias that the students are being exposed to. Anatomy textbooks. There's a disclaimer, I'm an anatomist by background. Anatomy textbooks always present the male first, and several pages, and the female is presented as 1 or 2 paragraphs as a footnote at the bottom. Now, embryologically, all embryos start as female and then become male. So actually the male is a variation, but that's never featured. But every day, lots and lots of bias built into everything that our students look at. Then we get onto the idea of paradigmatic, that doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? Trajectories. So this is how our community of practice tells people what careers they should and they shouldn't pursue. And you can see this probably links to some of the maternal wall bias things that we've already talked about. But women can only model their careers on the role models that they meet, that they should only do careers that they're competent to do. Patients referring to medical students who are male as doctor, asking the girls if they're going to be a nurse. We've already touched a little bit on the heteronormative assumptions, but the students have also talked about seeing this within the clinic. But the students have cottoned on. They know that actually all of this bias, so often we've got hundreds of quotes from Chinese student, a girl who was told, you should be working in a nail bar. Trying to, a female, Asian, inexcusable, not being backed up by clinicians, nobody challenging the patient, but they're taking it, think, it's just part of broader society and the culture. I need to tolerate that kind of abuse. Female medical students walking into a ward and the male patient, oh, here come the dancing girls, little elbow to the guy in the next bed. We've touched on the fact that people obviously have lots of different protected characteristics. There you go. We've got the quote about the nail bar here. He'd say, you can see me working in a nail bar. So that's also racism and sexism. Yeah, I'm a girl. I don't deserve to work in a hospital. And obviously Asian people work in a nail shop. It's multifactorial because I'm female, because it might be because of my race. But if there's anything that you take today, I'm not, in this talk, I don't want to present lots of interventions. We've got loads in a report if people are interested. I just want you to get to think about the kind of bias that might be around. If there's anything I want to try and tackle first in the faculty, it's the physical environment. Too male, too pale, too stale. So this is a photo of the Royal College of Physicians in Glasgow that my PhD students took. They also took another one of them all posing in front of them. We don't think about what the physical environment is doing to our students. It's automatically telling them they don't belong here. If you're a female, or if you're anything other than white, this is not the place for you to be. The imagery is always male. The changing rooms, men's toilets are closer to theatre. Ladies are down the corridor or on another floor. Men's toilets are closer, always more convenient. Airports, you'll clock it now. Now I've told you, you'll clock it. Manchester Airport, exactly the same.
Oh dear.
Women's are down a side corridor. But everywhere the students are looking, the faculty are looking, this is not the place for you. You don't belong. And it was only in 2019 that the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health had their first portrait of a woman, Nina Modi, as the president. But the men are starting to push back. It's the wrong time to be a white male. They're starting to feel that actually, Athena Swat, we've done enough for women. Now I'm starting to lose out. So we're starting to see all of this sort of tension between things. And starting to doubt whether we're actually, it's that sort of tokenistic element, doubting whether we're selecting people truly for their skills or just to tick the race box or to tick the gender box or whatever it might be. And this is by practicing clinicians who are supposed to be working to reduce health inequalities, and we know that LGBT people have worse health inequalities in the UK. It is absolutely systemic. So I just thought I'd leave you with some of the patterns that we're starting to see from the clinical academic side. So we've got our man who's been suffering from racial discrimination. He's noticing an absence of mentors who look, think and sound like him. He feels quite disadvantaged by Athena Swan. He feels judged because he's in different environments all of the time. There's a duplication of effort. People are quite snobby about his research. All of these different kinds of bias that's resulted in him losing the spark. Whereas the woman's feeling dismissed by gender. No one thinks she's committed enough because she's got children. She's trapped, she can't look for different sorts of jobs. There's a duplication of effort and she feels quite deflated. Every time she goes to a conference, it's all men. Sometimes women get to chair, but very rarely do the women get to present. They're often relegated. And it's only going to get worse if we don't act now in terms of the pandemic. More women are starting to feel like 1950s housewives. They're assuming more traditional, as the media would call it, gender roles. And there's now a reduction in publications from women. So I wouldn't really try and draw any conclusions, I guess, because today's about being a panel and having a discussion. But some of the key messages, I guess, is around the gender bias and the heteronormative assumptions that are so well ingrained into our physical environment, into the way that we teach, into the way that medicine's taught. The maternal wall bias, being aware of that, and every little comment that we make to students, how it can inform their career choices, as well as the impact of that physical environment. And I really want to advocate for more inclusion of feminist theory within our curricula. So I'll leave it there and let you think about what we could start to do.
Thanks very much, Gabs. That was thought-provoking, and how. I did have some points, but maybe we'll let the observations come in and then we can come back to those. So, Banji, thank you so much for coming. Banji Adewumi, is a breath of fresh air. Manchester sometimes gets it right and had the enlightened insight to appoint her Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And you're utterly welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and those online. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this event. And can I match what Professor Gabs has shared with us? Not, but I would share a little bit about myself. So the topic I'm looking at, of course, from sticky floors to glass ceiling, and I'd like to be able to share a little bit about my journey as well. So for those who know me, I describe myself as being visual, hence more of pictures than words on the slide. And starting with the first picture, much better presented on Gab's slide, with the very shoe being stuck onto the floor with the glue. I would like to add the perspective of a black woman. Obviously, I am black, and those who might be able to detect from my accent, probably of African descent. And even that in itself providing another layer to what is known as discrimination in the workplace. And the sticky floor experience, which for some individuals, I must say, they have given up hope. And why do I say that? I've spent over 11 years in the NHS, and I have listened to a number of stories of individuals who say the words quite close to this: I do not see myself in band 7, for those who are familiar with the grades in the NHS. And why? Because of the absence of role models. Why? Because of the absence of those who look, sound like them. I was privileged to be part of a team that was involved in career development program that actually, for some individuals, it was more of, oh, so I can aspire to that ceiling. Talk less of get into the glass ceiling. So I just thought I should add that perspective to this story. So there's a quote I'd like to share with us. Some of you may have read, heard about Meyer. Well, hopefully all. No man can know where he is going unless he knows exactly where he has been and exactly how he arrived at his present place. And why am I referring to this quote? Because of the concept of, generational trauma. As a black person, you can't but be aware of the fact that, yes, there was slavery. I say it boldly and I repeat, slavery, which has had an impact on the experience of people of color over every single continent on earth. Professor Gabbs ended by saying something about the curriculum, the absence of, or should I say, the reference to, decolonization. And I know there's, in many quarters, a resistance to that. And how I describe decolonization, I'm going to do a visual, hopefully people can see me. So this is the current curriculum, and this is what's absent from the curriculum. And I'm not saying remove stuff from the curriculum, I'm saying add what's missing, and here it is, complete story. I say this also because I've been a governor in a school and also been part of some work done in a local authority somewhere down south, where students are actually saying, Miss or Sir, certain aspects aren't in this particular story that you're sharing with us. What am I trying to say? Technology has enabled students even to know, in some cases, far more than what the lecturers are sharing with them. So referring to the past in addressing the present to enable us to get to have a better future is quite key. Excuse me if I've spent too much time on that slide, but I felt it was necessary. In addressing the challenge with regards to the sticky floor and even the glass ceiling, I'm going to refer to two areas, the institution, and the second would be the individual. Why have I chosen this picture? It resonates with me. As I said, I've spent 11 years in the NHS, and I made a conscious decision to leave. I still love the NHS. In fact, many times I refer to NHS still as home, and no problem. I am in FBMH, so even closer links to the NHS. And I see the institution, in this case, the academic sector, as one that needs to position itself, one in recognition of the challenges faced by all its workforce and its students, regardless of their color, regardless of their background, and the need to nurture, the need to provide such an environment where each and everyone can fulfill their potential. So look at the flower beds. There's some that are growing, some that are not growing. This was the best I could find in the time given me. But then you could well have such plants that would even grow taller than the other, yet in the same bed. For those who are gardeners in the room, don't need to wave, but just emphasizing the need to focus on the environment as opposed to placing the blame on the individual plants. And why do I say that? I'm making reference, and the academics would know this better than I, when we apply a deficit model to certain individuals by virtue of their gender, we're talking about gender today, and even more so because of their color, because of their accent, because of their background. Please, let's be cautious of that. So that's the institution, and please, Dr. Nat, please let me know if I'm going over my time. With regards to the individual, I've chosen these pictures. These were made by myself, and as part of some studies I'm engaged in. The first picture was part of my I would say artfully knowing and expressing how I felt at a particular point in time in my journey. And I remember a colleague of mine, she mentioned, oh, but Banji, you've got your hands out. That means you could do something if you look at the first picture. And then it went ding, oh yes, the responsibility on the part of the individual who feels caged, who feels their foot is stuck to the ground or the floor. And why am I emphasizing that? In the sense that there is a responsibility even for each and every one of us. Even as we're collectively saying break the bias, there are steps you and I can take. And I say this with reference to those who feel their foot is literally stuck to the floor, but also those individuals who have spotted, who recognize and know that, I'm using your name for the sake of, not you in particular, Professor Gabs should be over there, but she's stuck there due to institutional barriers. And I hope I'm connecting with people, not necessarily using the big words. So for individuals, recognize where you are. As I said, that was the picture. I felt I was caged, and I'm saying it openly now. And I knew I had to take some steps regarding emancipation. Not necessarily saying that everything's totally free, recognizing, of course, challenges not just in the organization, but also in society. And, very quickly, moving to the next slide. So for each and every one of us and to our audience, my message today is from moving from sticky floors to glass ceiling and beyond. There is a need, yes, to break the bias, as has been shared in the set of slides earlier to mine, but also the responsibility that each and every one of us has to play. There has been bias built in right from day one, and as I close or round up, I'd like to share at least 2 stories. So first, some may have heard me say this before, I studied chemistry, and some have wondered, so what's that got to do with what you're doing now? A lot. But there's a story behind this. A government institution that I applied to some years ago, not disclosing my age, of course you can see my silver linings. The response then was, due to your background, unfortunately you're not successful on this occasion. That was very painful. I took a different route, which was very much competency-based, and here I am today. Thank you to that government department. Secondly, there's another story with regards to my experience in a particular organization. And, oh yeah, I have to be careful, but anyway, I shall say it. And, okay, I'll say this aspect of me. Those who know me, and you've seen me present a few minutes, I have been moving a bit. I'm trying to contain myself. It had been said on some occasions, one, you need to stand still, and something about you're too expressive. Oh, that did hurt. In terms of our personalities, in terms of embracing difference, how as workers, as colleagues, are we supportive of that? Talk less of being a woman, talk less of having children or not, talk less of being a carer. Many are the challenges faced by people who are different to you and I. And in the invitation to break the bias, I would say starts with you and I. How am I relating to those who are different to me? And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much, and reminding ourselves, our values, our people, our future. You and I have a role to play in shaping those. Thank you.
Incisive as ever, Banji, thank you. And now, another pleasure to introduce Professor Margaret Kingston, who's Director of Undergraduate Medical Studies in the School of Medical Sciences. And I've had the privilege of working with Margaret on the front line, but also now in faculty business with the undergraduate curriculum. So the stage is yours. The floor is yours, Margaret. Go ahead.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for asking me to come and talk to you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about my lived experience as I've got off that sticky floor and made it towards the glass ceiling, and what it's been like experiencing some biases along the way. And some of you, when I was thinking about how to talk to you about this in a way that was helpful, I was on a bit of social media, and I noticed this on Facebook that was shared on International Women's Day last week. And I thought, gosh, it does feel a bit like that to me sometimes. You know, tenacity, as I have found, is really, really important in medicine and medical education and the practice of medicine and academia now. So I thought, right, I'll do my own version of this. But I'm also going to talk a little bit about what can be done and what I have seen done to help deal with it. So first of all, my first observation is that she's on her own, and I haven't been. I've been surrounded by some brilliant colleagues and friends all of my career. And medicine is like that. And those of you here in the room who've practiced medicine will know it's full of camaraderie and bravery and lots of help. So a few photos there with me with some of the women I found inspiring. So there's me on my graduation day from medical school, from Nottingham University, and it was such a brilliant experience experiencing university. And I'm there with my good friend Rachel, who some might recognise now as medical director of the Children's Hospital, and she's truly inspirational, and it's been a pleasure to share our medical education and careers together. Many of us, another photo there from 2 years ago, so many of us when COVID happened left our areas of research and specialist practice to go back to general medicine, didn't we, Tony?
You did.
We did that together,
Yeah.
and you can tell this is the early days of COVID because we're not wearing masks yet. We didn't have any. And there I am on one of the first COVID awards, this time 2 years ago, with my friend Tina Davis, one of the acute medical consultants. And for those of us coming back from specialist practice after many years, it was quite daunting. But we managed, and we managed well, I think, because of colleagues like Tony and colleagues like Tina who looked after us and enabled us to practice safely and to support them as best we could. I think one of my other observations of medicine is that it can be really, really demanding, and it will take from you what you give it, I think. And as you say, Banji, you've got a degree of control over this. And it's really important to look after yourself, maintain your family relationships, maintain your friendships. And there's me on a day out with my mum and my sister. Always important to make time for you and to make time for those around you and not let medicine take over, because it's a greedy master, and it will if you let it, but you don't have to. So now some of my quotes as I've progressed through my career. So here's some early careers advice I got at school. Now, when I was at school, I was really into music, and this was the careers advice to be a music tutor, because it was a great thing to do until you got married and had a family. And this was a comprehensive school in South Yorkshire in the 1980s. Not many people went to university, and no one had ever done medicine from my school. So there were assumptions there, not because people didn't want you to progress, but because that just wasn't what people like us did. And the advice was what seemed achievable rather than ambition. Moving on and going through medical school, as I said, I had a brilliant time at Nottingham. It was a fabulous experience. And those of you that have done clinical exams will know that they're sometimes on real patients, aren't they? And sometimes those real patients join in with their opinion of the people that they're marking. And it doesn't take much to realise that they weren't marking our clinical ability, were they? They were making some very specific comments with the old men on the general surgical ward. And you can just imagine how intimidating that is as a young woman trying to make your way through a course. So moving on now to postgraduate career, and I stayed in Nottingham and I worked for some brilliant people there, some professors of medicine, and I was really fortunate to get married early in my career, and I got engaged just after graduation actually, and I was working for one of the professors of medicine, very eminent man, Dean of the medical school, went on to have really a fantastic career himself at the GMC. And of course in those days we didn't do bare below the elbow, so he noticed my engagement ring and he said, one of you will have to sacrifice your careers, you can't both progress and be successful. And I was so grateful to him for that advice, because it meant we together could really very carefully plan about how we could, and we have. And my husband has a successful career and so do I, I am grateful to him for that bit of advice. I think both of us definitely have had different careers had we not committed to each other so early in them and made the decision to have the children that we did. They've definitely been different, and I've definitely made choices to help him and he's made them to help me. But I don't think I'd regret any of that, and I don't think he does. So I carried on through postgraduate medicine and was really thrilled to move to Manchester. That was for my husband's job, but what a brilliant job. Got my consultant job at the MRI. fantastic place we work, isn't it, Tony? It's a brilliant hospital with loads of brilliant colleagues. I was the first woman consultant in my department when I was appointed 19 years ago now. And at that time, it was a much smaller department, and all the consultants shared a little suite of offices with a bathroom and a kitchen and so on. And that's what one of them said to me, you know, because I was the first woman to share that space with them. And that was their response. Actually, quite a nice man, would you believe? But, you know, it was that kind of boyish banter that was it's just so unpleasant, really. And it does kind of wind you down a little bit. So I've been really blessed with 3 wonderful children, and they were all born quite close together. And this is an observation from somebody who was the clinical director of medicine at that time. Because I'm sure I did mess up his workforce planning by having going on 3 lots of maternity leave, one after the other. But, you know, at least I'd hope that even he wouldn't say that these days. But that was the kind of perception, as you alluded to, Gabrielle, in your talk, stated, you know, that maternal bias is really, really clear in the maternal wall. And these are quotes from patients, actually, more from patients, because you are very public in medicine. You're dealing with the public, and they don't apply a filter a lot of the time, and it can be quite hurtful, some of the things they say. And obviously, reproducing as a woman is really visible. You know, you get pregnant, go off, come back, get pregnant. It's really obvious what's going on to you, on with you. And you know, certainly lots of my patients often express an opinion, you know, it never staggers me. Even recently, a young woman commented on my hair and told me my roots needed doing. And you know, it's just never ending, really. However, what to do about it? So I have also been incredibly supported by men who have helped in overcoming all of this. So when I was a junior doctor, we worked between 80 and 120 hours a week. It wasn't very safe, and the European Working Time Directive stopped it, of course. But there was a lot of support and camaraderie around you all the time, and you were really grateful to that, for people just saying, I'll take your bleep, go and sit down, go and have something to eat, go to the toilet, why don't you? You know, and that kindness in supporting you and supporting each other is really still there in medicine. There was a lot of male hierarchy in medicine, there probably still is. And there'd be a lot of the old professors sweeping onto the ward in the morning, expecting you to be ready for the ward round. But not everybody was like that. This was a lovely man I worked with at Nottingham City Hospital who was a stroke physician, and he came in one morning and I wasn't ready for him in his white coat, and it was been a really busy night. There were notes everywhere. It wasn't very organised. And he said this to me. And, you know, just that kindness, just that simple act of kindness, I really appreciated it. Some of my colleagues have really spoken out in support. And when our old clinical director told me off for messing up his workforce planning, he did it in front of a room of people. Of course, most of them are your male colleagues, your male consultant colleagues, and one of them said that out to his face, which wasn't easy for him, really. You know, just don't talk to her like that. Just, you know, just call it out and say it's just not acceptable. And I really appreciated that. I thought, why didn't I say that, actually? Why didn't I tell him not to do that? But I think I was a bit shocked. In our hospital still, you have to have a colleague sign your annual leave form to say that they'll cover your clinical work. And of course, once I'd started having children, I wanted to have those during the school holidays, or once the kids had gone to school. And this is one of my colleagues who still to this day plans all of his holidays. He doesn't have children, especially when it's not the school holidays. He goes and he checks the Trafford and the Manchester school holiday dates and always books his holiday when it isn't those, and then comes and signs my form. How nice is that? You know, it really makes a difference. People who proactively offer to help you. I think getting small children through nursery without any time off is virtually impossible. They get kicked out for all sorts of things, and sometimes at very short notice. And that proactive, I'll help you. Gabrielle, you talked earlier, didn't you, about how women often don't put themselves forward, or when they do, they're not given that opportunity. And there's been a number of times in my career where I have been given a step up probably when it was a bit of a stretch, by men, by women. And that also has been such a positive thing, really. And that quote's from my husband. So I mentioned earlier that we both had this, had managed to have careers and to enjoy them and enjoy a degree of success in them. But what we've done, which I think is different to quite a lot of people of our generation, is that we've also shared childcare 50-50 and shared those childcare commitments 50-50 and taken that view that sorting out school clubs, going to parents' evening, all that stuff is something that we both do together. And I think he's really enjoyed it, but that is unusual. Most of my friends and colleagues, that's the women do that, and the men's career carries on unchanged. And that's been different for us, and I've really, really valued his support and his understanding. I think one of the other things I did in my career, and I do advise students and junior doctors to do this, is to find the specialty that you love, that really sets you alight and that you really enjoy. Because once you love your job, you don't go to work again. It's that old saying, isn't it? And I work in genitourinary medicine, so HIV and sexual health, and obviously I've developed myself in education over the years to the role I've got now, and I have really loved that. So here are some of the really inspirational women in my specialty who have helped me, and people that I've trained, and I've been able to help them, but they have helped me back in the same way as well. We learn so much from our students and trainees all the time, don't we? And I work with some amazing inspirational women who I'm proud to call my colleagues, and whom I think we get from each other so much more than just clinical camaraderie. You might recognise there's a lady with blue hair there on the left. That's Professor Chloe Orkin, current chair of the Medical Women's Federation. Real inspirational woman, an HIV consultant at Barts. Fantastic. And if anybody's a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians, Olwyn Williams at the bottom there, second picture from the right, is currently standing to be president. And I think she'll be amazing. I've known Olwyn for such a long time. One of those people that really helped me when I was a very young doctor and gave me that hookup. So a little bit about, I think, what we can do and what we can be positive about. So I'm really pleased to have found my tribe and to reflect on some of the really positive as well as challenging things that have happened over the years in this regard. I think I'll stop there, Tony. Thank you very much.
And now our fourth speaker is Rebecca Farrington, GP and clinical senior lecturer and in the School of Medical Sciences. And Rebecca, you're going to give us a slightly different perspective, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm just, sorry, I've got my notes on here rather than slides. But, okay, so I'm coming from a primary care perspective. I'm a GP, and lots of what everybody said so far has really resonated with me. I could have conversations with all of you about lots of what you said, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience and the experience of our team in primary care, because there are some challenges working in primary care. So I'm going to start with just an idea of how things actually have progressed. So I'm old enough, as you can see, grey hair. I'm old enough to have been around and experienced some really quite horrific discrimination as a junior doctor in medicine as a woman, and and going through my reproductive life and now into a position of leadership. So my very first job as a doctor was on a surgical team, and I landed Christmas Day. I got that lottery, Christmas Day, and there we were waiting for the consultant surgeon to come on his Christmas Day ward round, and up he arrives, and there's a male house officer and myself, and he brings a lovely bottle of Islay whiskey. I'm from Islay, and Islay whiskey is lovely, for the male house officer, and for me he brought a tutu to wear on the ward round. Less said about that the better. Moving on, early 2000s, unfortunately I had to have IVF treatment to get my children, my twins, who are nearly 18 now, unbelievably. And I had 6 attempts at IVF. It was a really prolonged and really quite difficult time in my life. I was a GP partner in a rural practice in Wales, and I used my annual leave to have all of that treatment. I didn't have any time off sick. But when it came to having maternity leave, my partners informed me that there were no financial compensations within a partnership to enable that. And actually looking at how much it would cost me to pay for cover for my job, for somebody to come and cover my job, would mean I would get into substantial debt. And I was actually better off resigning my partnership and claiming state benefits for that period of time. So things have moved on. Those rules are different now for doctors coming through. And I can't imagine any junior doctor on any of the wards would agree to wear a tutu on a ward round. So there has been progress for sure. And now I'm in a leadership position within the university where I'm responsible for recruiting, for hiring, for supporting a team of clinical academics. And that's an amazing place to be. We work really hard in community-based medical education to have a diverse team, because they are really important role models for our next generation of community practitioners coming through. 50% of our graduates, that's the aspiration, will work in the community as generalists. And that is often overlooked. And one of the things that happens a lot is that working in the community, working as a GP, working as a generalist, is denigrated. It's very well evidenced that people go, comments like, oh, you're too good to be a GP. Okay, when in fact, general practice is a really intellectually demanding career with a lot of scope for academic work. And it is often very, very undervalued. So we're working from there. Gabrielle, you mentioned how doing research in education is bottom of the pile. I'd contest that. I'd say being on a teaching-focused contract with no research is bottom of the pile. And that's where we're at. But we do a massive amount of teaching our young doctors. What they learn in the community is hugely valuable to them. And they come back having loved it. But we're not always in a position to be able to show how much we value that to the people out there doing that teaching because of the ways that the institutions work. So yes, there's a gender pay gap. I think in general practice, 55% of general practitioners are female, but for a salaried female GP, there's a 22% pay gap. And they should be the people with the hard, fast contracts that are really easy to negotiate. Not the case. But really what's holding us back often is the denigration of what we do and the lack of recognition, the lack of value of what we do as generalists and as community workers. It's not glamorous. So, you know, most lives are saved in primary care, but it's done by people who wear very focal specs and stay pressed slacks and, you know, work in Weast and Lower Broughton. It's not house, is it? It's not casualty. But it is a really important part of what we do. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage our students to recognize the value. We're giving our students opportunities. So we have had a load of success with co-production in our curriculum. So particularly from our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee in the medical school, they've co-produced staff development activities, they've co-produced curriculum reviews and changes to personal and professional development portfolios and all of those kinds of things. They're amazing. They have such brilliant ideas, loads of energy and loads of enthusiasm. But by including them, we're giving them that experience, A, as teachers for the future, so that they can have that on their CVs, but also being able to value what a clinical academic in primary care does. So I think that is important. For our GP trainees, who are often not able to teach like trainees are in hospital just because of the logistics, we're giving them the opportunities to teach near peers. And we're formally recognising that again, so it can go on their CV, so that they can take that trajectory and become clinical academics of the future, the clinical academics based in primary care in the community. what we're doing for our GPs out there who are qualified and interested in teaching, we're organising stepping stone jobs for them so they can facilitate small groups. And we as academics can help them by doing university-approved peer review. And again, it's formal. It means it's recognised. When they come for a job as a lecturer, there is something there that is recognisable on their CV, giving them the opportunities to be primary care clinical academics. And likewise, for our lecturers who are in our team, we very much value, we're promoting and we're encouraging and we're supporting and financing them to do leadership courses, the Aurora course, which is aimed at women, and the Stellar HE course, which is aimed at people from minority ethnic communities. So we are doing things to promote primary care academic career paths, and I think that is very, very important. But there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of things we'd like to push through, a lot of ideas that we've got. Remembering that our workforce in the future, our medical workforce in the future, will be in the community. It will absolutely be in the community. So I saw a patient this week, an 84-year-old, who'd had a double mastectomy and was discharged home the next day to the care of her son who had learning difficulties. You need a generalist to look after that family. And that is continuing. That is how medical care is going to look in the future. So please value your primary care clinical academics and your primary care physicians. Thank you.
I'm going to reserve my comments for the moment. Rebecca, thank you. And our last speaker is George Obolo. George, most welcome. A third-year medical student and co-founder of the award-winning Black Excellence Network. So, George,
Yes.
stage is yours.
Yes, I'm not sure where to look. Do I look over here? I'm going to look over here.
Look where you wish.
But yeah, like you said, my name is George Obolo, and I'm one of the co-founders, one of two, of the Black Excellence Network. I am a guy, so I'm just saying that from the onset. But I will be speaking on behalf of the Black Excellence Network. Just to give you a brief about what we do, is we support black students all the way from sixth form age onto their careers. For one, their progression into certain careers and into university, but also two, improving their experience there. We're really passionate about not getting a black student somewhere and leaving them there. So those are kind of that's our main purpose, really. We do that through two ways, and I'll bring it into context of this event after, but the two ways we do that is one, through mentorship. We provide mentorship to black students in sixth form, but also in university. We provide the mentorship for all sorts of careers, one of them even being research as well. And then we also provide consultancy calls. We realize that not every valuable exchange actually happens in a year-long mentorship relationship. Sometimes you just need that one phone call with Banji or one phone call, like you just need that one call, and we see value in that. And then the other way we kind of add values to members within our network is through partnerships. So for example, we have closely worked with this faculty actually on the racial task force, decolonizing the actual curriculum and doing other work there. In context of this event specifically, first of all, the other co-founder, her name is Ayinda. She goes to Hull York University and is also a medical student. And she said that I should remember to say specific things, so I'm just keeping them in the back of my head. But for us, specifically in the area of medicine, we right now, we started in August 2020. We've grown our network to around 1,500 black students. And a large chunk of them are actually within the kind of the medicine area. In fact, I think it's around 600 of them. And then around 70% of them are actually prospective medics, and they're women. And with these women, what we're seeing with a lot of them is all you've mentioned, and for us it's very striking to hear these comments, because one, they're giving us comments that are generally heard within the black community about not seeing role models, but then they're also giving extra comments about their gender being an extra hurdle for them, and that intersectionality is providing them a lot of problems. And us seeing that, we try to double up just to give a disclaimer, it's Women's Month essentially, so we're actually doing a campaign to support them a lot. And what we're doing is we're actually providing then with consultancy calls with other black women that are medics, other black women that are in research, because we do see the power in them seeing someone in that space. And with the Black Excellence Network specifically, we realize and we're really passionate about the one. So typically we focus in on one student's story, and we kind of see the impact in that. And the fact that we can do that for 300, 400 prospective black medics or prospective researchers really touches our heart. So what I really came here to say and emphasize is that there's a lot of work to be done. We do believe mentorship and consultancy, we do see that as pulling leaves off a tree, because we think there's a bigger problem at hand, and we're really trying to get to a stage in which we can cut that tree so that there's no longer all of these hurdles, which is why we're really big on partnerships. We've been in talks with Department for Education as of recent and UCAS to just do more impactful work and kind of cut that tree. But yeah, I just wanted to give a better idea of the work we're doing, and hopefully we can gain the support of all of you and the amazing work you're doing. So thank you so much.
Well, there is the panel. They've all spoken, and we've got the face-to-face audience and the live stream, and so I presume that we will get some comments from outside the room. The app's there, so you can enter and join the conversation. While we're waiting, I want to ask a couple of questions. Oh, and I want to make a comment first. Rebecca, you said the lowest of the low is the people on the TNS contracts, and yet you're the most precious that we have because you're part of our education team. But having said that, in a sort of semi-defense, I would say that Gabs would say that she's setting up the pedagogic research, and there is a group forming, and there's no reason why TNS can't be changed to TNR for the right reasons. I just want to put that down there.
Yeah, and I think the work that Gabrielle's doing is fantastic. It's a real move forward, and it's very, very welcome. But there are things like progression difficulties when you're on teaching contracts. Things like, for example, if you want to have an international reach with your work, you need to publish. But when you're on a teaching contract, you've got no access to open access publishing. You've got no funding for open access publishing. That's one small example. It's just another obstacle, another hurdle that you have to get across.
Okay, and Gabs, don't you think that if the Royal College of Physicians in Glasgow were to move or to rebuild itself, the ladies would be closer than it is? In other words, that's an historic legacy when medicine was purely male. I mean, that's when it was built.
I'm going to be very careful with my words. You could still physically change a space just because it's historic. We're talking about imagery on every single wall saying you don't belong here, and I don't think there's any excuse now.
No, I
accept
that.
Yes, you can have protected collections, can't you? But I think, why I wanted to Stopford, when the irony of meeting the students who'd written the piece about tackling sexual harassment in the Stopford building in the university, and the only picture was of a white man at the head of the table. And I think, Whitworth Hall, of these beautiful old buildings, but we can still accommodate other people.
Right. Point well made. Yeah, Rebecca?
Well, exactly the same. You don't have to go any further than Stopford. And that corridor where the committee rooms are, where every single picture...
Yeah, the previous deans, yes. I was going to make a slight comment about that. I thought that was you could say that reflected women's intuition, that they don't want to take a job like the dean's job. But I know it's not true. But in those days, I've lived through a lot of those deans. There was, at one stage, all the professors of medicine in Manchester were male, and the dean's job rotated round from Salford to South Manchester to Central Manchester every 3 years. And there was no breaking that chain. So, and then, of course, the pictures went up. So, and we're still waiting for that mould to be broken.
But the women were probably told not to embarrass themselves by applying, or not to, there'll have been, as well as it being that boys' club, that any woman who may have put her head above the parapet most likely got all sorts of tacit messaging constantly,
SMS is, we have Director of Undergraduate Studies, and 50% of our division leads are female, and that's
Rightly so.
conscious bias.
Yeah, and Tony, if I could
Yeah.
just add to that, the more what we've just been talking about emphasizes what other scholars have described as the snowy white peaks
Yep.
of the NHS. So where's this place for those of colour?
Yeah, no, I take that point. And George, your presentation, I mean, the fact that you need that society in 2022 or 2020 when you set it up is a worry, which, I mean, your ambition would be to be made redundant.
Yeah, we often say we exist to not exist.
Yeah,
We hope
yeah.
that we no longer need to exist.
Which is commendable.
And the fact, in the faculty, we've got the Black Pharmacist Collective, just shows how systemic these issues are. That's in one faculty, we've got two separate student bodies trying to work towards better inclusion.
I mean, Margaret, we've talked about those 3 students that wrote to the BMJ. Perhaps you'd like to develop that story a little bit, because did they ever make an official complaint? So we couldn't actually formally take that forward. And again, did we find out why they wouldn't do that?
They said they didn't know how to do so. I mean, I have investigated complaints like that before from female medical students and from junior doctors, and often a common complaint is that others in the area didn't speak up.
Yes,
They didn't say, don't speak to her like that. So Rebecca's doing some advanced teaching for our clinical tutors, aren't you, around that? And we're developing active bystander training now for all our medical students, so that they do know what to say and how to speak up and feel empowered to do so.
Natalie's got the microphone.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of raise what you're actually doing now to sort of equip students to sort of stand up and deal with all these microaggressions, giving that active bystander training. I don't know if you want to sort of expand on it.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, and there's obviously logistical and funding issues to contend with to roll it out, but we're definitely making some inroads to that. We're going to hopefully deliver some bystander training to all year 3 students as they're going into the clinical environment, because we know that the clinical environment is somewhere that they will encounter discrimination of all different kinds from senior colleagues, from their peers, but also from patients. So that's an important point in their medical school career, to be able to be empowered to say, hang on a minute, that what I just heard you say has made me feel uncomfortable, for example. And it's something that I think we need to also, it's multi-pronged really. Our senior leaders, our staff, our PS staff, our academic staff, as well as our students and our clinicians out there, all need to have levels of awareness raising around these things. Some are more equipped already than others. Some trusts are already very good at this. But I think across the board, I think we have a duty of care to our students and our staff to manage this.
Just maybe ask the panel about how you sort of see working with the trusts, with our sort of clinical students, sort of working in a different environment, and how we can best support our students. And by working together with the trusts, what's the way forward?
Well, we have a really good setup in Manchester where we've got a whole set of academics and the equivalent of PS staff working on medical education in all of our trusts. So we work through them. But there's also a fantastic setup for developing our educators as well in One Med Learn. So we've got direct contact as well.
And I'd just like to add to what has been said in terms of a network of the EDI leads of the hospitals together with the university. So as a university, we have reached out and likewise connecting with colleagues in the hospitals in Manchester.
And by the way, for context, I'm a 3rd-year medical student at University of Manchester. I'm currently placed in MRI actually. And yeah, I think that what you guys are talking about actually addresses definitely a real issue, because what I've seen, after conducting surveys from other black medical students at this university and other universities, is they're not sure where to go if they actually experience a problem. And we're put in an environment where many medical students don't feel like they can speak out, especially being a black medical student, because we're not sure of the repercussions we may experience. And even sometimes where there are opportunities and avenues to speak out against sexism or racism or all the both, often medical students are just not aware of it. For some reason, even though comms are because sometimes I've had conversations with people and they're telling us communications have actually been sent out, but for some reason we're still seeing this disconnect between the faculty and the medical students.
We've heard this again and again, and I know that Margaret and myself have worked extraordinarily, well, we think we've worked hard to try and improve that. And you're still saying there's an issue, so I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, just to acknowledge, yes, a lot of work has been done, and one of the projects I've recently commissioned, well, for the university, is the review of our complaint process. We are hearing what you've just said from other quarters as well, and I do know colleagues are doing extremely well in facilitating the report and support platform as an example, but we're not quite there yet, and we acknowledge that openly. But please be rest assured that the review of the complaint process, which includes mapping what is available in the first instance, because some people not knowing where to go, hopefully would enable us to address the issue.
Okay, so it's a work in progress.
Yeah, and I think we...
Kat, you've got questions?
Questions coming in from the online audience. Can you perhaps see a time when individuals are seen regardless of their sex, colour, disability, sexual orientation? If so, when and how to expedite the following?
I'd like to go first and just say this is my dream. It's going to happen in my lifetime. I've worked with a HR director of people, an OD director, who would say, let's do this for our children. I say, no.
Do it now.
I want it done now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Gabs?
No, so this is somebody, I think you had your hand up, a comment. Or,
Can you ask that question again?
Yeah, so do you see a time when individuals are seen regardless of their sex, colour, disability, sexual orientation? If so, when and how to expedite?
So a brief comment is that I would want to say that I want to see a time where those things don't hinder progression. I think one of the things I hear that people try to say, and where it's coming from, is that I don't see you as black. And what I would say is that I don't. My blackness means something to me.
Say it.
It's
Come on.
important to me.
Yeah.
And so I want you to see I'm black, and I don't want you to treat me in a funny way because of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
My culture and my part. So that I want to kind of. I think it's important that we do recognise, because that diversity is good.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that everybody, regardless of their difference, are able to get to the same.
Are you finding your disadvantage?
Oh yeah, I think I am. I think my experience and lots of people I talk to in doing some work in the school in Sheffield, and some of the stuff I hear from these kids is just really mind-boggling. And a lot of it is around not seeing people like you. So going back to that complaints thing, what's really interesting is that if you don't think someone will understand your issue, you're not going to tell someone.
Exactly.
It's just going to be dismissed. So, in a sense, your perception is that it's going to be dismissed.
Yeah.
But actually, if you do bring an issue, often people are more open than you think.
Yeah.
But if your sense is that people don't understand why this is offensive to me,
Yes.
then what are you going to say? Or when someone dismisses your experience?
Yeah.
One of the things I want to ask the panel, but I'm particularly thinking about Banji and George, but it's everybody, is how do you manage the pressure? Because you are leaders in your fields in regards to thinking about women in high spaces.
Okay, we've got it. Banji, do you want to have first
I'm
bite
going
at
to
that
go
one?
first. Yeah, it's emphasizing what I might not have been explicit about, but self-care. Self-care is crucial. It took me a while. As I said, my first picture at the beginning of my studies was that being caged, and I felt it like it was real. Embodied is the word, and I silenced myself. And when I say that, I mean zip. You hear from me in reports, yeah, but no voice. So self-care is crucial. And I would say choose your outlets carefully. And when I say outlets, maybe not the right word or the academic word, excuse me here, but could be family, could be friends, could be a mentor, could be a coach. You must, I would say. I talked about generational trauma. Linked to that is an experience I'm now reflecting on, of course, as an adult. My mum, and I've said this before, right from a young age said, whatever you do not become a nurse. For those who don't know, my mum's a nurse, she's still alive. At the time, I did not make any sense of it. But the very first day I walked through the corridors of a hospital in this country, it sank really well, and it became clear what that meant. So hopefully I'm giving you some tips. The other thing around self-care is, and it's linked to what other colleagues have spoken of, look out for what works for you. So artfulness is one of my areas, and of course art is wide, not necessarily saying I know how to draw, but even just that aspect of doing art. You've seen some of my works, it's therapeutic for me. And another aspect I didn't realize, but adding fun into work. And again, acknowledge what you said. Because I said to my boss, Patrick, it's either that I'm happy, I'll be crying every day. Because no 2 days are the same, and there's so much in the world of EDI. Thank you.
George?
Yeah, for me, I think the feeling of pressure typically comes from thinking that you could possibly do something wrong, right, or possibly do something incorrect. So the way I kind of tackle that is I always try to stay informed about my community, so that if my work is totally informed by then, I know I can do nothing right. It's their voices that are actually dictating the actions, not actually my mind or my thoughts. Meaning that pressure is kind of alleviated because it's informed by them. I think also reminding you of I remind myself of sometimes the impact, and try to remind others. So for example, Manny, I actually had him in consultation skills in first year, and he's the only black person I'd ever seen in that space, or black. I don't think I ever had a black lecturer. So unintentionally, and I've never said this to Manny, but unintentionally, he acts as a role model, and unintentionally, he actually helps people. And knowing that all of the things you're doing is impacting people, yes, within your community, but people that are from afar, once again, just alleviates that pressure because you know you're doing an informed thing.
Okay. We've got more questions. Kat?
More from our online audience. Could you speak about the dichotomy between women and those with disabilities? Are there lots of parallels?
That's got panel thinking. Who's going first on that one?
I'll go first, maybe by expanding the question, but in essence, just drawing our attention to, well, the world after COVID, if I can put it that way, and the recognition or the acknowledgement of colleagues who, up until lockdown, hadn't shared information about health conditions that now require that specific attention they require, and the impact of them be in returning to work or even progressing in work. And I don't want to be generalistic, I haven't conducted a research, by the way, but certain individuals, there would be that thought in terms of, oh, now can I put myself forward for this position now my manager or my colleagues know about this condition. So I might not have answered the question, but just broadening it, and it's something we need to be mindful of, especially as we aspire to be exemplary with regards to not just breaking the bias, but being inclusive in practice.
We've got more questions from our audience. So in surgery and medicine, there's evidence now that female partners of male consultants might be more likely to be doing the childcare rather than vice versa. How do the panel think this could be addressed, or is it actually a problem?
Margaret.
It's been a problem in my experience, and I think this is where role models are really, really important. And sometimes, because we're not explicit about who we are and talk about our experiences, people just don't realise that's happened. You know, so one of my wonderful foundation doctors said to me recently, oh yeah, so I'm really not going to go into hospital medicine. I really want to have a family. You can't do that, can you? And I was like, you're saying that to me? You know full well I've got 3 children. I worked part-time for 10 years because I wanted to. Medicine's actually brilliant for that kind of thing. You know, working part-time is something that is built in now to a lot of postgraduate training schemes. It's much easier to do, especially as a consultant. You know, so I guess it's for people like you and I, Rebecca, who are clinical, you know, who have actually done it, to talk more openly, and that's why I wanted to talk about that really, about how we make it work, because we have. And it's not been easy. And I think some of the things that I've shared and I've heard you say is that it has moved on an awful lot, and so it should, and it's got a long way to go still, but I think we just need to be really explicit about how we do that, because it's happened in this generation, and it needs to not happen going forward.
Yeah, and also just very briefly to add to that, to anyone who's listening, linked to that question, the university is quite responsive to the need to change. I'm speaking also on behalf of Adele McKinley, our new Director of People and OD. Even up until last week, we're recently looking into reviewing one of our policies, as we recognize some of our colleagues who are surrogate parents, and the need to revise the policy in light of that. So please speak up should the issue not be addressed in current policy.
And I'd like to add as well, from a primary care perspective, really, that, you know, people go, oh, go into GP, it's family friendly. Well, it can be, you can make it work for you that way, but it isn't necessarily going to be like that. You know, I can remember a situation on a Friday afternoon where I was supposed to pick my children up from school, and the locum didn't show up. And I actually rang my defence organisation and said, well, school are ringing me saying you need to come and get your kids. My husband was away for work. And the practice has nobody to cover, and they said your responsibility is actually to your patients.
Wow.
You need to stay. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily always follow. And you know, I've been very lucky that my partner's managed his career around mine, and we've had a partnership. He does all the cooking. That's amazing. And you know, it's like Ready Steady Shop. I buy the ingredients, he does the cooking. But you need to make it work for you, and it's not always about the choice of specialty. It's about you and your relationships and how you build your life around your work.
Any more?
I think there's some.
Oh, sorry. Please, could you tell us who you are? Can you tell us who? No, use the microphone. Tell us who you are.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. So my name is Joyce. I'm fairly new to the university, just over a month. I'm in staff learning and organizational development, people and OD. So basically, like, it's interesting to hear, like, from everyone in the room, you know, lovely points raised during the presentation. But I've got this question, because it feels like I'm in a sticky floor, or I'm on a sticky floor at the moment. So I'm just wondering, how do I move from that sticky floor to the glass ceiling, per se? So to give you some sort of like context, obviously, you know, I'm black. I'm a black African, Nigerian, and also I recently just finished my maternity leave. So my son is going to be a year next month. So I'm just like giving you the context. So I'm, you know, black African, and then, you know, I'm a woman, and then I've got a child, and then I'm married to a doctor. So my husband is currently doing GP training at the moment. So, and you know, during GP training, like, it's quite tedious, you know, the exams, you know, everything else that you've got to do. So I feel like, obviously, I want to be successful in my career, but I've got these blocks everywhere. And also, like, obviously, my husband tries, like, we try to do things 50-50, but then I also know that he's got this GP training and he's got these exams he's preparing. So sometimes I might, like, have to, like, step back and say, okay, you take this time. I'll take care of the child, you take this time. But then I feel like there's this, you know, there's so many roadblocks. So how do I move from this floor, you know, to the ceiling? Anyone, you know?
Where do you start?
Yeah. Okay, I'll say a little bit, and then I'm hoping other colleagues would add to that. I would say, for me, I'm not doing textbook answer. That's what works for me anyway. There are times in our lives, and I say our lives as a collective audience, when we can do what I would call sideway development. Sideway development to prepare us for when that opportunity does arise for us to make that move. So I can identify with some of what you've described, Joyce. And it's a situation where you feel there needs to be this ladder that gets me to here, but here I am stuck here. My personal advice would be, especially as you're accommodating your husband's diary, and his plans to complete his exams, which would be your joy. What can you do while you are where you are? And you're new to the organization, so I personally know that there are quite a number of opportunities available to you in the department you're in. That's one. Two, being able to plan what's called your career planning. This would be an ideal opportunity, and then see how you can fill in the gaps. So is it Mags I need for stage 2? Is it Tony I need for stage 3? And is it the other Mags I need for stage 4? And get that homework done while you can. I'll pause at that stage. Thank you.
It can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes, can't it, when you feel that there's blocks at every stage. And I think sometimes you're right, there's a time for just sort of sitting still for a little while and enjoying where you are. You've got a baby. I wish mine were that age again. Enjoy him. Before you know it, they'll be giving you a load of lip and you know, you'll be poor because you're constantly taxiing them around and paying for stuff. So it's a precious time. So I think just enjoy every stage of where you're at. There are times in every partnership where you give and take, you know, and there have been times where I've supported my husband through a stage in his career and when he supported me. And we give that give and take. You know, part-time training can be fantastic, actually, and it's so much easier to do that now than it ever has been. So if that's something that would work for you as a couple, think about it. You know, I often say to people, medical careers and all careers, actually, they're not, you know, you're not trying to get somewhere as fast as you can. Enjoy it as you get there. You know, and enjoy what you're doing. Take that time and just very carefully, you'll work your way forward, you know, and while you're doing it, look after you.
Yeah.
Don't give up. You will get there.
Yes.
And find the time to look after you. It's really tiring having a young baby as well, isn't it? So you absolutely need to find that time. And if that, you know, I used to go to swimming lessons at night when my kids were little and they were in bed, finally done. And, you know, I've got a bit of time to myself, and Dave stayed at home and looked after them, you know, and that was my time for me. So find your time for you, and just try and find the pleasure in it all.
Have we got a last question?
Yeah, what advice does the panel have for women who are still experiencing microaggressions for being bossy and or difficult?
Save the rest of it. Rebecca.
Crack on, be bossy.
Maybe I should go to George.
And if it's a black woman, refuse to be labelled as the angry black woman. There's something about valuing diversity, but you be confident within yourself.
Natalie.
If I could just ask one very quick question. If you were to be able to implement one change, what would make the single most rapid change to people's sort of progression?
Do you want to go round the panel?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, start that in.
Oh, sorry. How about that, George? What do you think about the team ethic? What would you change?
What would I change? What would I change? Wow, that's a big question. I think no, it's fine. I think the change I would make would be to improve the connection between current students and people in faculty and in careers already. Just because I think a lot of the work we're doing now, and even this event, it is preparing the environment for the next generation that are going to enter these spaces.
Margaret?
I think it's being proud to look after yourself now and talk about how you've overcome things like sorting out childcare when you've got your husband. You know, for us to say how we've actually done it and not appear to be something we're not.
Gabs?
I think it'd be the physical environment. More diversity in the space and the people on the walls and the, you know, awning being
I got that, loud and
clear. You know, whatever it
We
is.
need to go and take those pictures down.
I'm just off to the Stopford after.
Let's do it.
Banji?
What's the name of the guy?
Banji?
I would say speaking up more and be more confident, because I started late. That's how I'll put it.
Rebecca.
More of these conversations, more
Okay.
of these open discussions where people can ask questions, join in, think about solutions, figure out what's going on already, joined up ideas. We've got amazing students with fantastic ideas. We don't use them enough.
I think we're out of time.
I think that we probably are.
I was going to make one. I mean, you remember when you came to see me, Natalie, and you said you wanted a little fund for emergency childcare. Do you remember that?
We have that fund, thank you.
Oh.
No, I wasn't. No, but I was going to take it one step further because I think it was Rebecca raised the issue about childcare and you wanted to go and present. And was that right, or did I miss that point?
Oh no, it was in the,
Or was it
from
Mark
the clinical academics.
Yeah.
Set.
Yeah.
getting childcare? Well, I think we could do that as well. That's what I was going to say. So we will do that as well from a school perspective.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Is that
We
all
need
right?
to publicise it though, because nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't do everything. I know. Down to you, Natalie. So,
And academics returning from maternity
yes.
leave.
Yeah. Well, we feel very strongly about that. Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it is. The way it's written at the moment is it's support for people to additional childcare costs to attend conferences or so on, or for people who have carers, whether they've got disability and we need somebody to come to a conference with them to help support them.
Yeah.
That's really good.
We've got that.
That's good.
Yeah. So we should draw things to a close. So thank you so much to the audience in the room. Thank you so much to Gabs for the opening it up and for the panel. I thought the discussion was excellent, and I think we should thank Natalie and her team for putting it together. Well done once again.